I was an atheist. I decided I was an atheist when I was 13 years old. And the way that I made my own way to belief in, first of all, a God and then ultimately a personal God, was because of the conscience, right? Like I had this voice inside me that directs me to try to do good and avoid evil. And it seemed to hint that there was an objective moral order. And I sensed when I was at odds with that objective moral order. And then I had to ask, what is the source of that moral order? And ultimately it became that there's a God who is the Lord of that order. Now, scientists might say, well, that's the voice of thousands of years of evolutionary kind of ingrained behavior. Sure, as a how answer, or an answer to a how question, or it's your synapses firing in your brain. Sure, that's again a question, an answer to a how question, but it doesn't answer those why questions, which find the sort of richest, fullest answer in God.
That's actually the perfect segue then for the second question, which is God reasonable? And as you may know, I made a pro-God argument in my last book as I was defending liberalism. And what I found was this is where a lot of liberals sort of get disjointed. The Bill Maher liberals, let's say, sort of get completely out of whack when you say anything about belief. So I'll let you answer your own question there.
Well, lots of religious people also get out of whack in response to that, which is that the liberals will say that religion is only a matter of feelings and therefore is sort of irrational. And some religious people go along with that. And they will say, yes, my faith is just purely based on revelation, and it'll be unreasonable, and it makes me do unreasonable things. At its most extremes, you have radical Islam of that kind of view that says, well, God tells me to kill the infidel, and there's no arguing with that. And so the chapter is an argument for, basically the classical proofs for God, and for the specifically the medieval mode of reason, which I argue was a more capacious and generous account of reason that said that not only can you reason about what you could see through demonstrative knowledge. I see certain changes in the seasons, or I observe regular movements of the heavenly bodies, and that tells me something about them. But also I can then reason further beyond that, and not relying on revelation at all, or the Bible, or what have you, just using my natural reason. I would have to find some way to explain why all this change happens. So what is the ultimate cause behind all of these? And that, as St. Thomas famously concludes each of his 5 proofs for the existence of God, that's what people call God,
Right.
And so it's a case really for what's called natural theology. What you can learn about God, not using the Bible, but just using your human reason. And the fact that this God would allow you to know him by your reason suggests that he's also a reasonable God, so a God who doesn't call you to kill the infidels.
What do you think about the sort of micro versus macro argument when it comes to this? That, I know plenty of non-believers and atheists that are perfectly moral people and decent, upstanding citizens. But at a macro level, at a societal level, it just simply cannot work. You actually get into this a little bit later in the book, so we'll get there too, but that it doesn't scale, basically.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's an argument from just looking at history that some of the worst regimes in the human history have been the atheistic ones, because if you remove some higher authority that checks human power and say, well, man can do anything he wants, that's an invitation to Stalinism. That's has been an invitation to the horrors of North Korea and the Chinese Communist Party, or what have you. But more fundamentally, look, the people who are making claims about what's good or what's moral, in a way, in St. Thomas's terms, they're already arguing for God. Mm-hmm. Because if there's something that's good, then there must be something that is the most good, and thing that you most imagine is the most good what people call God, because there are these degrees of perfection. So I think that when people say that, in a way, it's an invitation to God rather than a refutation.
Did you happen to see the clip that went viral a couple of weeks ago of Jordan Peterson talking about God and belief with Tucker Carlson? Did you see that by any chance?
It's probably on that show, the Tucker Carlson Tonight. I love it, but I haven't seen that episode. No.
There's a really extraordinary clip. I'll gladly send it to you, where Jordan's basically talking about belief in God, and he said that when he was about 25, he decided to tell the truth, meaning for the truth's sake, that no matter what the outcome of saying the truth, not that everything will be good, but it will be the best possible outcome because you're putting order into the world as opposed to putting lies out there. And he said that that was the ultimate expression of faith, believing in truth just for the purpose of truth. And I thought that was as well explained as I had heard, basically.
I agree. And, order is the first law of the cosmos. And, my own, look, I was an atheist. I decided I was an atheist when I was 13 years old. And the way that I made my own way to belief in, first of all, a God and then ultimately a personal God was because of the conscience, right? Like I had this voice inside me that directs me to try to do good and avoid evil. And it seemed to hint that there was an objective moral order. And I sensed when I was at odds with that objective moral order. And then I had to ask, what is the source of that moral order? And ultimately it became that there's a God who is the Lord of that order. Now, scientists might say, well, that's, the voice of thousands of years of evolutionary kind of ingrained behavior. Sure, as a how answer, or an answer to a how question, or it's your synapses firing in your brain. Sure, that's again a question, an answer to a how question, but it doesn't answer those why questions, which find the sort of richest, fullest answer in God.
Right. So that basically that thing that sits behind us all the time that sort of is your moral compass, that kind of led you there. So that gets us actually to question 3 quite nicely. Why would God want you to take a day off? You mean we're allowed to take days off still?
No, I don't think many of us are, and I live as harried a life as anyone, where I'm constantly, right now I have my phone on airplane mode, and it's making me twitch. I can't tell what's happening. But the chapter is really a case for the Sabbath, and it's told through the point of view and life of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a great Hasidic figure in the mid-century. And he had escaped Nazi Germany. Much of his family had perished in the Holocaust. And he comes to the United States and he sees some of the same restlessness that had disturbed him about Europe in the first half of the 20th century, where, as he saw it, much of life was devoted to making conquest in what he called the realm of space. And the realm of space is the realm of geopolitical conquest. It's the realm of economic competition. It's the realm of doing better than your neighbor. And, some of that is legitimate. Those are important goods that you should try to secure. But he argued that that you also need to give some time for the realm of time, which was the realm of the Sabbath. It's the realm of the eternal, where you actually declare peace on your neighbor for a day. You declare peace in the economic competition. And in doing that, you find an inner liberty, because you're setting aside all these kind of material attachments that define the rest of your life. And I argue in the chapter that there's also kind of setting aside all the religious dimensions. There's a kind of temporal secular benefit to that, in the sense that our lives, we were told getting rid of the Sabbath would be a source of liberation. And in practice, what it's meant, it is liberation. It's liberation for the market. It's liberation for the corporation. It's not necessarily liberation for the family. It's not liberation for the worker. And that, I should mention, this is a theme throughout the book. That's something that tradition proposes and looks like a restriction on our freedom. And you're like, oh, I don't want this. In fact, once you lose it, you realize that restriction was a source of freedom. And paradoxically, the loss of the restriction makes us less free. You're more harried. You're at the mercy of your boss.
Well, as you may know, I try not to tweet on the weekends, and I usually tweet a goodbye on Fridays. I'll be back on Monday. And Ben Shapiro made the point, you'd know that Jews have basically been doing this for a couple thousand years.
Yes, 3,500 years.
It's been around for a while, this relaxation. Do you find that, especially now because of social media, that this is of particular importance to take the Sabbath, whether depending whether you're Jewish or Christian or whatever, whether it's Saturday or Sunday or a whole weekend? Do you think that the social media component has really made this more complex?
Well, I mean, I absolutely think. I mean, I see it in my own life. I try to take the Sabbath, for Christians, the Sunday Sabbath. I try to take it seriously, but there is that twitching, like I said, and so there has to be. You have to impose discipline on your own life. I mean, I favor certain restrictions, like limiting as Senator Hawley has proposed, limiting the infinite scroll or what have you. But at the end of the day, look, you've got to take ownership of this, and there's so much to be gained from turning everything off and not being a slave to that ghostly blue glow, 24/7.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about spirituality instead of nonstop yelling, check out our spirituality playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.